Sometimes when we begin to question our faith or have doubts about our tradition, it can feel like we are wandering out into the desert. When we take a step back and honestly evaluate organized religion in the 21st century, many times it doesn't make any sense. The more we cling to it and try to save it, the worse it becomes. In addition, widespread abuse, cover-ups, and victim shaming cause some of us to question whether it will ever be right again.
The Desert Sanctuary was created by Karl and Laura Forehand. It consists of a podcast, a blog, along with Karl and Laura's writing.
We're happy you're here. Welcome to the show. Hello and welcome to the Desert Sanctuary. I am Laura Forehand and I'm here with my husband, Karl Forehand. I don't know why I decided to make some
that's your Southern accent.
I know. I'm just loopy already today. Yeah. So, but anyway, I'm excited to be doing this podcast with you. I'm excited to learn more about a lot of these different content areas that we're talking about. So yeah, looking forward to it.
I was able to read Kiersten's story. And so I know a lot about the book and I know a lot about her story, but you don't.
Yeah.
So she's going to tell us here in a minute her story, but there's a lot in it. We could probably be here for a long time.
Yeah.
But we'll try to keep it to the right amount of time.
Well, anything you want to jump in there and talk about?
Yeah, just that we've been, over the past several years, we've been working through writing the books and doing different things like that. There's been a lot of YouTube stuff created and I've never been successful at promoting that. So there's probably 100 videos out there from the Leaning Forward conference and all the different things that we've done and writing the books and doing the commercials for the books and things like that. So I'd encourage people to go out there. I'm not very good at getting people to subscribe. Yeah. All my promoting a month ago got 4 new people. So anyway,
those people are important.
Yeah, of course. But anyway, the YouTube videos are out there. I want to make sure to point people to that. Our Patreon page is back up. And feel free to get out there. We're working on putting more content out there. But that's not what we're here today to do. We're going to talk to Kiersten, right? Who is Kiersten?
Kiersten. To those who know her, Kiersten Hathcock is a former TV marketing exec and TEDx speaker turned Shark Tank winner. Self-taught carpenter and furniture designer who built an internationally known kids furniture company out of her LA garage. Behind the scenes, however, Kiersten privately struggled to survive and heal from childhood sexual abuse and narcissistic abuse, all while grappling with newfound mediumship abilities that led her to pen her debut memoir, Little Voices. She also co-founded a nonprofit with retired NYPD Detective Mark Pucci that helps crime victims and their families. So welcome to the podcast, Kiersten. We're so excited to have you here, and I can't wait to get into this discussion.
Thank you, Laura. Thank you, Karl.
Please share your story in as much detail as you want, and then we'll build off of that. We may even interrupt you, but we'll try.
That sounds good.
All right.
Interrupt away. I will give you the abridged version because I know, there is a lot. Like you mentioned, there's a lot to my story. I want to just start off by saying I'm originally from Ohio. I come from a very...
stop you there. So yes. Where? Because my sister lives in Ohio.
Oh, okay. Defiance, Ohio. It's up near Toledo.
Okay. Yeah.
Where's your sister from?
She's more like the southern part, Hamilton.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So we used to live in Oxford.
Okay.
Where Miami University is. Yeah. So yes.
And my niece and nephew both went to Miami University.
Oh, I love that.
Anyway, I love making connections with people. Sorry to interrupt your story.
No, it's okay. So yes, I grew up in Ohio. My dad was a football coach. Both my parents were teachers. My mom went to Miami University, actually. I come from a very grounded family. My grandparents were Baptist. They went to the Baptist church there in Franklin, Ohio, because they lived in the southern part. And I grew up believing that there was something bigger but I didn't necessarily grow up going to church every weekend because, my dad being a high school football coach, Sundays were sort of our time. And I honestly think that my parents felt very early on, they could see the hypocrisy that happens, within the church. And I think they kind of started to back away. I remember being actually, to be honest with you, kind of jealous of all my friends that were Catholic, that were going to catechism, because it just felt like a big party. They would come in the next day talking about pizza parties and all that. But now as a grown up, I'm so grateful that I was not in church every weekend. I was not going through that because it gave me a chance to kind of, sit back and look at everything from a bigger view, like a 30,000 foot view.
Mm-hmm.
So I just want to start with that. So that's my basis. So I was kind of plugging along my entire life until I was 36. My husband and I and our 2 kids were living in Los Angeles at the time of my spiritual awakening. I wasn't looking for it. It just hit me over the head. And as you can imagine, it's pretty terrifying. And so what happened is I was in the garage, I was building furniture, and I would be, working on a piece, and I would see nails move across the workbench on their own. At first, I'm very scientific. So at first I just kept thinking, well, there must have been a tremor. We are in Los Angeles. Mm-hmm. Then I would hear voices. Then I thought, well, this is the polyurethane that I've been breathing, for a few years.
Isn't it amazing how we excuse all these things away, right?
Yes. And I did it for probably a good year and a half until what I noticed was it kept ramping up and ramping up and ramping up to the point where I was seeing mostly children in spirit. That's who I mostly communicate with. Children walking across my kitchen. And, at that point, I remember kind of privately talking to my husband and saying, this is crazy. Like, I would understand if you want to put me in a mental institution because this seems nuts.
Yeah.
But I started to also have, I think I was just tapping into that inner knowing and understanding that, there is something bigger out there. And I don't know if I'm necessarily crazy, but I need to research this more and I need to figure this out. In the world of mediumship, the only way to really figure it out is to actually reach out to whomever, is coming to me to pass messages. And if they're saying, please pass a message to my, to my parents or my grandparents. Mm-hmm. So I had to take that leap. And I will tell you, it was terrifying. It was scarier than going on Shark Tank. I always say, people will say, oh, Shark Tank, oh my God, that was so amazing. That had to be just absolutely, had to scare you to death. Mm-hmm. It did. But not like this, not like this. And, it took me a long time actually to figure out, do I want to be this person? Do I want to risk this for my family, for my business? I am not the woo-woo person, that I would see, in Sedona and, I'm not wearing a headscarf. I'm not, I was just a very normal, everyday woman from Ohio originally. So I ended up reaching out. Finally, kind of got the courage to reach out. And as I started sharing messages with families, and then I was guided to share with some cops, as you mentioned, like Mark Pucci, different detectives around the country, everything was validated. And that made me think, okay, well, I am truly not losing my mind. This is a good thing.
Right.
That was interesting enough. That was just the beginning of my journey. Like, that seems like that could just be the whole book, right?
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't. So after I start to understand that this is real, it was about 2 years of channeling. Out of nowhere, I start to, and I'm mostly working, to be honest with you, a lot of the cases I work on, and a lot of the kids that come to me have been murdered. Some have died from suicide. There is some sort of end that was very quick and very tragic. So those are the kids that come to me. And I started to see, and a lot of them had actually involved, or a lot of them had endured sexual abuse, unfortunately, in their lifetime. So one day, I'm just kind of doing my thing, probably working, I think, if I remember correctly. And all of a sudden, I see a flash of myself as a little girl. And then I see what looks to be a scene of sexual abuse. And it took me back because I'm so used to channeling about other people. And I must have been a cop in a past life because I can actually take that information and very much, kind of separate it, compartmentalize, and just, okay, I'm going to write all this down and we're going to solve this case. In this case, it just took me aback, almost like lost my breath. And I thought, oh my God, that was me. Why am I being shown this? I have no idea. Well, then I would start to get more visions and more visions, to the point where I started to realize, oh my God, they're coming to me because I'm in their club, that this happened to me. It's just that I didn't perish. But I ended up basically recognizing that I was abused sexually and raped between the ages of 3 and 6 multiple times by a distant uncle.
Mm.
When you go get all the way to 36 in your life, and you're like, I used to think, wow, I don't have a lot of memories of my childhood. I love my parents. My parents are fantastic, amazing people, loving. But why don't I have a lot of memories of my childhood? I started to be able to kind of go backwards and piece it all together. Well, why did I have to have vaginal surgery when I was 19? I don't quite understand that, and then so it finally made sense on so many levels why they were coming to me, and then why all of this stuff happened in my life that I didn't quite understand. So it was at that point that I thought to myself, you know what? I got this. I'm a doer. I can just go to therapy. I'm just going to, talk my way out of this. Check the box. I'm healed, right? Not understanding how the subconscious works and how the subconscious drives 80% of our behavior. So I had no real recognition of that. Not even after going to multiple therapists was I told that my subconscious drives my behavior. It cracked open this vault of pain in me. At the same time, it was sort of the perfect storm. At the same time, our marriage looked perfect from the outside, but there was a lot of codependency on the inside. I ended up losing my job, and all of this stuff kind of came together at one point. And enter a man who swept me off my feet, said he was going to take care of me. It was everything I think little Kiersten needed in that moment. And little Kiersten was saying, bring it on.
Yeah.
I felt like I was unraveling. I was just spiraling. And of course, not understanding why I felt attracted to this person. I went through about 3 years. My husband and I had split up at the time. I went through 3 years of narcissistic abuse, domestic violence calls, the whole thing, only to, finally wake up and realize that this guy was actually a predator. And, the stories of the predating, that he did are just unbelievable. I was getting messages when I finally kind of came out and was vocal about what happened to me. I was getting messages from women all over the world. I was getting messages about girls that were 15 and he was 47. It was sort of an unbelievable full circle moment for me to go, how in the world? Oh my God, I'm a childhood sexual abuse survivor, and guess who I fell in love with? But that wasn't even the biggest full circle. The biggest full circle was the fact that these children that were coming to me to pass messages, had been sexual abuse survivors. They were the ones who actually helped me survive that relationship and get out of that relationship. So they were coming in, and, I'm so used to working on their cases and helping them. And they were turning it around and helping me and saying, go get the restraining order now. You have to do it now. You have to do this. You have to do X, Y, Z. So, I credit my family, but I also credit them for saving my life, because I know I would have perished in that relationship, whether it was by his hand or just the deterioration that you go through when you're in a domestic violence situation.
Right.
That was really the big full circle moment for me. I will say my husband and I got back together, which is amazing. And I just love that man more than life. He and I, were apart for 3 years. He credits that separation, to be honest with you, with growing up a bit. And, we were able to look at our codependency that we had together and say, thank God, we might not be together now had we not gone through that. So we kind of look at it, as strange as it sounds, as a gift. And so, from that point, what it was really interesting after I finally kind of climbed out of the abuse and was healing, everything started to open up again. Detective Pucci and I had been working together for about 10 years, but he came to me and he said, now's the time. Let's do this. Let's start a nonprofit that helps crime victims and their families so they don't have to pay, for us to provide services. So we're raising funding for that. It's called NILJ, National Institute for Law and Justice, NILJ.org. So, to be able to kind of come full circle with that too is pretty incredible. I still work on cases daily, weekly. It just depends. It's all volunteer. I'm still the CEO of Mod Mom Furniture. I do a lot of marketing work. I also work with entrepreneurs. The message that I always share is to trust your intuition. And, I was told a million times that starting a furniture company in my garage without any experience, without any money was crazy. And yeah, on the outside, it was crazy. But my intuition was what was actually guiding me there, So I talk a lot about that with entrepreneurs because, that's a key thing, right? Like there's a roadmap for life. If you trust your intuition, you kind of have the keys to be able to move forward. So that's that's me in a nutshell, in my story in a nutshell. There's a lot of ins and outs throughout that journey that are detailed in Little Voices.
Yeah, and like I said, I enjoyed the story. Part of it, what is captivating about it is there's 3 or 4 stories going on, and you're following all of that. And I was so frustrated when I wanted you to get away from Tony, and and you weren't, and you were trapped. And all of it, plays like it was really good. We've done 240 of these episodes where we listen to people's stories. A lot of them are from church harm. We call it church harm now, not church hurt. And we don't always know exactly what the story is going to be, but it's surprising to me how many of those stories end up saying what you just said. You have to learn to trust yourself. You have to go inside, and you have to. The answer is not somewhere out there in the sky. It's within you, and you have to learn to trust yourself. Can you speak a little bit more about that, about how you finally healed?
Sure.
Okay.
So, I think what I've been able to deduce after all of this is that, as a child who was basically kind of groomed to please in order to survive, it absolutely cuts off your intuitive wiring. Because all you're doing is making sure that everyone else is okay. You're surveying the room all the time. So my mode of operation became that for the first 36 years of my life. The hit to actually, trust the Mod Mom Furniture intuitive hit, say, no, you can build this furniture. That felt crazy. It felt absolutely crazy. And it looked crazy on the outside, but on the inside, it was really interesting because I think, and I tried to impart this a lot when I speak to groups, intuition will feel calm. It will feel calm. The idea might seem crazy to our conscious brain, but it just felt really, really calm inside. And so I think that was actually one of the first times. And then again, subsequently, when I went on Shark Tank and I had to stand up to the Shark Tank producers, I had to do it my way because I knew intuitively that was the only way I was going to get an offer. I trusted that quiet, calm knowing, and it would come out of nowhere. And that was what was also interesting. It wasn't like what you feel when you're in fear, when you're getting ready to do something that's scaring you. I didn't have the heart rate jump up. I did none of that. My body actually felt very calm. So, beginning to trust that in the beginning of this entire journey helped me through, because even through all of the abuse, I think that there was still, thank God, that inner knowing that I had the answers within. I knew long before I got out of the 3-year relationship that it was abusive. Unfortunately, also, when you're in that type of an abusive situation, it rewires everything in you. So, the cycle of abuse, right? You're pretty much in, if you look at it as a wheel, you're in a quarter of it is good, right? Otherwise, people wouldn't stay.
Right.
3/4 of it, there goes the devaluing. There goes the, it's very much similar to what happens with the church, right? The shaming. It's all of the cult tactics, to be honest with you, is how I feel, that are very, very similar. And so I didn't understand that because that's not something I'd ever dealt with before. So the more I learned cognitively, the more I was able to actually combine that with my own intuition. Now, being able to kick the habit, because I think in this case, he became a drug to me, that was very difficult. I didn't understand all of the biochemicals that were rushing through my body and how I had literally been groomed, to go back to him constantly. Mm-hmm. He would scream at me on the phone and he would hang up on me and I would call him right back. Like, who does that? Who goes back for more? I did. Towards the end, it was just unbelievable the amount of abuse he was heaping on me. And it was the chemical part that was keeping me in. Mm-hmm. And, had I not had the guidance and trusted my intuition, I wouldn't have gotten out, because that chemical part is so strong and intuition is more subtle, So, I really feel like my journey through healing had so much to do with understanding how abusive relationships work, understanding how the subconscious works, and how little Kiersten was driving that bus, because he was pretty much exactly like my uncle. I just didn't realize it, at the time when I met him. When I got out, I went to psychotherapists, I went to psychologists, did hypnotherapy, I did everything under the sun. And, thinking back, the questions I would ask and the things that my therapist would have to tell me, it's kind of unbelievable. It's like people would look at me and kind of roll their eyes, because I remember my therapist saying to me, Kiersten, if you don't want to go and eat out, like if Scott says to you, that's my husband, hey, let's eat outside tonight. And I thought, I don't know if I want to eat outside. Like my instinct was, I don't actually want to eat outside. My mode of operation was always to please. So I'd instantly say, yes, I want to eat outside. So she said, when you are asked a question, you need to take a beat. You need to ask that question in your head. Do I really want to do this? And then give the answer. So I had to rewire that programming as well. And I have learned, through my intuitive work that, I trust the intuitive hits I get too. So I have a lot of chills. I get a lot of, a lot of physical kind of intuitive hits. And I rely on that a lot. And so I think it really was a combination of all of it to be able to sort of break free and be able to step back and look at, I have all the answers within me. I don't need a man. I really, once I got to that point where I, could rewire the subconscious to say, no, you're fine just the way you are. Bam. Scott and I got back together. It was really interesting to watch that unfold. Yeah. I hope that answers your question a bit.
Yeah, I think you make such a strong point about the chemical aspect of trauma and abuse. I'm doing a lot of professional development right now, both in my career and also outside. It's just something that I'm really fascinated by. But just if people understood the brain chemistry behind, it, not that it would make so much more sense why people go back, but that's really, it is such, it's very valid what you're saying. Like your brain chemistry actually changes your brain. It's all, it's amazing. So I'm glad that you brought that up, because, so many times we, judge, right? Yeah. We judge people for going back or staying in abusive cycles. But the same could be said for church abuse. Why do we stay in that for so long? Because our brain chemistry has actually been changed.
Altered.
Yeah, it's been altered. And so, but I really like what you said about, trusting yourself. Like, did that take a while to really begin to trust yourself? Because we've talked several times on this podcast before that is something that's kind of indoctrinated in the church. That you are not to trust yourself. You're deceitful, whatever scripture you want to bring up for that.
Yep.
But, so did that take some time? And then how did you, how did you get to the point where you were truly trusting that intuitive part of yourself?
It did take time, honestly. Thank you for that question, Laura. It took a lot of time. It took a couple years for me. I think that had I actually been indoctrinated in the church, that would have made it a million times harder. But for me, because I'm so scientific, it was actually more of a, okay, I'm going to share this information. Does that validate? These are things that people that they knew I couldn't have known. Very, very specific things. It took that for me to trust. And thank goodness I had a few of those right in the beginning. So I was able to look at that. Then I started recognizing, we all get it, like when we get chills, right? That's actually a sign. That's a sign. So pay attention to those signs. For me, it's a sign of truth. If I have chills on my left side, it means that whoever is coming in to share a message with me has crossed over to the other side. If they have come on the right side, it means that they have not crossed yet. So, there was a lot of stuff I had to sort of decode. And in the decoding came the validation and the trust. But it is very difficult. And I think that, from what I've tried to do and what I've tried to talk about now, like I just talked about tarot cards recently. Of course, myself from Ohio said, oh God, no, I can't look at those. Those are from the devil. There's no way. Why would I do that? That's crazy. I'm not going anywhere near that. And then of course I ended up with, meeting these two wonderful men, and they were saying, hey, Kiersten, this is actually a really cool thing. If you try it, it's going to show you visually. You're a visual person. You're a designer. It's going to show you visually what your intuition is trying to tell you. Boy, did it ever. Because, some of the first messages actually came through that way. And then I started hearing, and then I started seeing, and then all of the clairs, as they call them in the woo-woo world, came together. But, just being able to figure out, well, what works best for me? What works best for me? And what do I know is true? I use pendulums too. If anyone is ever, out there who's listening has thought about picking up a pendulum, I have used pendulums for a long time in cases. I have found locations of remains. I've found, information that has saved lives of the cops that I've worked with. I don't think there's anything wrong in using intuitive tools. I know the church would say otherwise. And, but the church also says, right, Leviticus, that mediums should be stoned. I don't believe that.
I don't believe that either.
Yeah.
I'm going to go out on a limb and say no to that. But I think that it did, just know that it can take some time, and it takes, I'm a little ADD, always have been. So for me, I had to look at other methods. I know some people can sit and meditate for an hour. I go out of my freaking mind. So I had to figure out how to do things a different way. So for me, it's walking and listening to music. Something, even just the thought. I have to remind people that, sometimes you'll be thinking about nothing and this thought will come in. Well, that thought is actually a message that you're getting from your guides and angels who are trying to help you along your path. And especially when it comes out of nowhere. So I had to learn that when I'm in the shower and I have a great idea.
Yes, that's me all the time.
Right? Guess who's helping us out there? When I'm driving, when I'm physically doing something with my body, that's when those messages come in. So I just had to kind of learn what worked for me. But those are a few things that have worked for me.
Can I ask you I want to go back just a little bit. And you said, when you get chills on your left side, it's messages from people who have crossed over.
Yes.
And on your right side, it's people who have not crossed over. So can you speak a little more to that? Like,
Sure.
I can understand the ones that have crossed over, right? Because we typically think, when we think of mediums or people that are, being used by the spirit world, we think about that a lot, right? But when you say the right side and people that haven't crossed over, can you speak to that a little bit more?
Sure. And in my case, it mostly ends up being a lot of kids who have committed suicide.
Okay.
And unfortunately, in their faiths or whatnot, they are taught that they were going to go to hell. So they pass away and they leave their body, but there is this state where they're confused. They're trying to figure out what's going on. In the book, I detail a case where a boy that I did know who was on the other side brought a friend, and that friend had committed suicide. So he was would come in on my left side, but the friend came in on my right. And I knew immediately when he started saying, can you please help him? So my job was to say, honey, there is no hell. There is no fire and brimstone. You're not going anywhere like that. There is only love. And all you have to do is walk through this light. Now, I had to Google that. I'm going to be honest with you. I Googled how to build furniture. I Googled how to help cross spirit into the light. Thank goodness for Google.
Yeah.
Right.
Right. So I basically kind of in my mind created a light. And when I do that, it was interesting. I could see folks who were waiting on the other side, and that has been very common. It's very comforting too. Those, that child recognized and believed me, thank goodness, and went into the light. And I told him, listen, you can come back and forth, but when you go into the light, you're going to be able to get a bigger bird's eye view of life. What your life was about, why you're here, why what happened there. There is no punishment. There will be none of that. It will just be sort of looking at your life and seeing why you're there. And he came back. And what was so cool, because I have this code going on with the left and right, is when he came back one day and I could see him in my mind's eye and I knew it was him. He was on my left side and he thanked me and he said, thank you. That it was pretty touching. Very touching. Does that help answer that?
Yes, it did. Because actually, I was thinking that, I was taking it totally different. I was thinking that it was people, I don't know how to, that were still alive.
Oh,
right. Somehow communicating with you. Do you see what I'm saying? So
I do see
that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And I'll be honest with you, there's so much that I still have to learn. And I think I will always feel this way. I have channeled souls who are still in their bodies. And unfortunately, sometimes that involves trafficking cases. And so out of the blue, I will be in that situation where I'm in the back of the trunk. I am, and then I'm flashed with a road sign. And I know that child is still alive, but maybe drugged, so it's been really interesting for Miss Science here to try and piece all that together. And I only can point to physics and, and all of that, to help me with the science side.
You talked about one of your first cases was Carrie, I believe. Is that right?
Yeah.
And do you, what I remember is that later on in the story, you just kind of say, I can't tell you much more.
I know.
About that case.
Yeah.
But that was someone that was murdered, I guess.
Yes. Yes, she was murdered. I wish I could share more about that case. But that case, unfortunately, is connected to many, many, many other cases. So about 80% of the work I do, no one will ever hear about. That case, I did have to change names, locations. I changed everything related to it because there is a severe risk from myself, my family, all of it. It's heartbreaking, but I feel like, unfortunately we have these mass networks of pedophile rings that run throughout the world. And Carrie happened to be one of those that perished during that time. And that's why I couldn't give detail on that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was thinking about your explanation of how you survived in the world by fitting in. That you read the room. That's what makes you a good marketer. Things like that, right? I found the same thing as a pastor. We were church planters, so we'd go into a small town, and there'd be this church that's barely getting by, and we would go and fit in, to that community and relate, and it would be good community. There was some good things happened, but it ends up you lose yourself. Right. You never know who you are. You're always trying to be something else for everybody. There's what I want to say about your book is there's so many fascinating trails and lessons and things that the book can be valuable, I think, to a lot of people in a lot of different ways.
Thank you, Karl.
But we especially, for those of us that have church harm, church experience, there's that inner work that we need to do, shadow work, inner child work. And basically nobody gets out of childhood untraumatized or unscathed. And so I think we need all kinds of books like yours. Like we've done a lot of nonfiction, but I'm starting to write a novel every year. just to tell a story in a different way, to make up a
I love that.
story, but to incorporate that kind of healing that we need, because we've been so conditioned, that there's a magic church answer, or there's a magic drug that,
Yeah.
but really what we need to do, first of all, is stop hurting each other.
Yes.
Be kind to each other.
Yeah.
And then we need to deal with the trauma we have.
Absolutely.
And it's hard work.
It is hard work, and I think the hardest thing for me, and what I'm hearing from people around the world, honestly, is it's the shame piece. Shame just keeps us so pushed down, it just is so hard. And it was interesting. Just last week, I received a message from a woman who, she and her husband, I believe he was a pastor as well, is a pastor. She read my book and she said, for the first time ever, I see it now. I believe that gifts and intuition are a gift from God. And I thought, wow, that's amazing. Then she went on to tell me that she and her daughter had been estranged for about 10 years because her daughter had told her mom, I can see ghosts. I can, and that was not okay.
Right.
And so it's been pretty amazing to see just what can happen when you can take, a story like mine, right? Where I don't remember being born with any of this stuff. I know that, now I can look back and my elementary school friends would say, I don't remember it because of the trauma, but they would say, oh, Kiersten, you used to talk all about spirits. You used to freak us out at slumber parties. I'm like, I don't remember that. But, looking back, I think it's pretty amazing that people are able to, relate to your books, your story, everything that you are doing. I am so in awe of both of you. I know how much courage it takes to do what you've done. I know how much backlash you've probably gotten. I get a lot of backlash in myself. Have you read the Bible? I hear that all the time. So I just kudos to you for doing this and for, being very vocal about your journey, because I think all it takes is just one person connecting, and this family is back together again after 10 years. It opened up lines of communication. And I'm sure you're doing that as well, That's
really funny that you brought that word up, because I wrote it down. Because as we're all talking here, that's just a word that keeps coming back during this conversation, is the word connection. And so, we can see this connection between our conversation right here. But tell me, when I say the word connection, what does that mean to you? Because I think connection is so much bigger than we really understand.
Absolutely.
So what does that word connection mean to you?
Connection for me, now that ever since I've come into my mediumship skill, it actually for me means all of those things that happen right outside of us that we just used to think were coincidence, we're not synchronistic or anything like that. But just to recognize that there is, like you said, there's so much going on all the time. That connection between spirit and us, they're here, we're here, we're all, this is Earth School. We are just here to learn and love, right? If only we could get that on a big level. We're just here to treat each other how we want to be treated. And so that is connection to me, but also understanding to look for those connections, look for those synchronicities. I was just talking to a friend of mine, and she said, she was telling me about a dear friend of hers who passed away, and she went to this spot where they had spread his ashes, and she hadn't been able to get there for a year. She finally got there, and she just, sat on the dock and was just sobbing, and her phone rang, and it was from his phone number, from his phone account. And, talk about a sign, right?
Right.
That's a pretty in your face sign that he was saying, I know you're here. I love you. Thank you for being here. But the signs can be so subtle too. So for just looking for connections everywhere, to those who are on the other side.
Yeah. I love what you said about, we're all here.
Yeah.
And, I have felt that probably more in the last 6 months.
Oh, wow.
Than ever, like we talk, because we live in an old house, and I'm just there are others here, and like,
Yeah.
we're all good. Like, we're all good.
Yeah.
I'm not afraid of that at all. And I mean, there was a time in my life that I would have been very fearful, and I was very fearful of that. Because I think coming from the church aspect, you know, if you feel anything other than the physical, right? It's demonic somehow, right? So
Yep, that's always the narrative.
yeah. So I you know, I joke, but I seriously believe that there are other spirits like amongst us here, but we're all living in this beautiful like unity, and it's okay. Like we all share this space together. So
we do. If only we would just honor that, right? And honor each other's experiences, and, you know, not put all of these rules on everything. And I think that that's where, you know, like I said, you two are doing such amazing work to be able to sort of dismantle that and really look at, you know, what's the point of us being here? Truly, like we all have God within, however you want to name it. You know, we have God within, and you can love Jesus. And I love Jesus, and I also love all the ascended masters. I think they're amazing. You know, there are people that are put in our world that have amazing, incredible missions to help move us forward. And I think that, you know, we've come a long way, but we have a long way to go.
Yeah,
as well.
Agreed.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to clear my throat. I'm sorry.
It's okay.
Most of the time I have a coughing fit about halfway through. I have sinus stuff and so on. But anyway, so that hadn't happened today. We asked this question to everybody, and I didn't prepare you for this. Actually, we didn't give you any questions ahead of time. So this
that's
been a great conversation so far without any preparation. If you had a billboard that you could display to the whole world, what would you put on that billboard? What would be the phrase or the sentence or it could be as long or as short as you want, but what would you want to tell the whole world? What would you want to communicate to them?
That's a great question. I love that. Because my journey has been so much about intuition, mine's pretty easy. It would be trust your intuition, trust your gut. I think that at the end of the day, that's what everyone that I have ever known that has been in an abusive situation has said to me. I knew it. Something felt off, but I did it anyways. And so I had the same thing, and I was a medium, you know, like talk about being connected to your intuition. I ignored my personal intuition until, you know, it was really about saving my life before I got out of it. So I think trust your intuition. That's it. That's as simple as it is. And recognize that we have people around us helping us, even if we can't see them, because they are there.
Yeah, I love that.
And to do that, you've got to value yourself. You've got to value that you're as important as that other guy.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
and sometimes that's hard to do, right? Especially if we were taught our whole lives to only look to the church for answers, to only look outside of ourselves for answers. Then how do you practice looking in? And that's why I'm hoping, you know, my story and your story and all of the beautiful people out there telling these types of stories, that it strikes a chord and people are able to kind of crack that open a little bit and look at that, you know, because they can change their lives by trusting their intuition.
Right. And by telling our stories, I feel like that goes back to that connection piece, right? It's a way for us all to connect. So
yes, exactly.
This has been, I love it. I just love this conversation so much.
Oh, good. Well, me too.
How can people get in touch with you if they want to know more? And again, tell us the title of your book, where we can find it.
Okay, great. So the title is called Little Voices, and I titled it that because of the little voices that helped me, and also my own little voice inside. And you can find it anywhere. It's sold at Simon & Schuster, Post Hill Press, so it's sold everywhere. I also narrated the audiobook, so if you like to listen, yes. And there's a whole, I mean, we could talk for another hour about all of the things that happened during the recording of the audiobook, because it was like, this is your life. They all kept coming in. and they were messing with the electronics. And I tell you, the sound engineer was like, I am forever changed.
Oh, that is
Yeah,
so
it was pretty
cool.
amazing. It was pretty
That is
amazing.
cool.
But if you want to know more about me, go to KierstenHathcock.com, KierstenHathcock.com. And then NILJ.org is the organization that Detective Pucci and I founded. So you can find all kinds of good stuff there. I have a lot of resources too on my blog and on my website.
Good.
Awesome. Yeah, Kiersten Hathcock, ladies and gentlemen. We want to get an applause meter, but we haven't got it yet. Up at the end. But for now, it's just me, and I'm not that exciting. So, for those listeners out there, we want to remind you to keep sharing the conversation about our book. I think you're going to enjoy this one from Kiersten.
Yeah.
It's just an adventure. It's a good read. So anyway, pick it up. Check it out and also learn from it. We want to remind you to be where you are, be who you are, and be at peace.
Thank you for joining us today on the Desert Sanctuary. We hope you find who you are as you embark on your own journey.
For all of us here at the Desert Sanctuary, be who you are, be where you are, and be at peace.